Westfield.
This is close to a stream of consciousness script, but there we go. Imagine making a game so impactful, so smart, so bar-raisingly impressive, so good, that not only is it copied after you release it, but everyone starts calling all these other games a clone of what you put out. I wager it's a half-decent feeling, to be fair. I could go into the story again for the 10 millionth time, but let's keep it succinct. Doom came out in 1993. No, it wasn't the first game of its type, but it was the best. From there we saw an arms race of developers trying their best to ape its original, with the ensuing flood of what we would call today first-person shooters, universally referred to as Doom clones. A quick aside, no, not everything you see in this video is specifically a Doom clone. I just played a load of 90s FPS games and jammed whatever footage in here. And when I say PC, I mean specifically IBM compatible PCs and their descendants, and not every single different personal computer. There, covered myself for some of you joyful pedants out there. See you at next month's meeting, I'll be doing the keynote. But Doom clones were everywhere, on every format, popping up in every magazine and on the finger lips of everyone in those dial-up message boards from the past. But why? Well, it was the Souls-like of its day. Doom was popular, revelatory really, and so because of that, everyone was talking about it, and because of that, it was where the money was. On one hand, you might make a Doom clone for PC and be able to carve yourself out a niche within the niche, and ride the coattails of success on the platform. On the other hand, it might be a disservice to call what you made a clone, given it added to the genre and took it off in directions its original could only dream of. While on the rogue third hand, you might be bringing your clone to a format that, like a notable chunk in the early to mid-90s, didn't actually have its own official version of Doom to begin with, thus plugging a gap owners of said format were desperate to have plugged. Given Doom can run on pregnancy tests and be powered by potatoes these days, it can be forgotten that at the time, Doom pushed the PC a fair bit. And given the PC had more to it on a hardware side than the consoles and other home computers of the day, obviously ignoring so many other elements that let the PC down like that god-awful MIDI sound so many people were lumbered with, it meant it was the only format that could actually really handle Doom. Ladled on top of that was the fact the PC as a gaming format was nowhere near the ubiquity it enjoys today. IBM PC compatibles were business machines first and foremost, with the ability to play some games as secondary attraction. Well, unless you bought a mega PC, that is. PCs were also way too expensive for the younger gaming market, unless Daddy the accountant had one in his office, like my mate's dad, with a 1993 mid-range PC coming in at around £1,600 in modern money. Compare that to around £250 in modern money for a then just launched Mega Drive 2, or about £230 modern money for a SNES with Super Mario All-Stars. And so the majority of players out there didn't actually own the format where Doom was born, where it thrived. They didn't have access to the biggest deal in gaming, and they could only stare on with lust in their eyes at the video game that had changed the world overnight. You can see why it wasn't in the least bit surprising that developers and publishers were suddenly pushing to be the first to get their take on Doom thrust onto any format that didn't already have it. It was a genuine phenomenon, and there was money, modern money and all other forms, to be made. Now it is fair to note that even back in the 90s, Doom, proper, official, non-clone Doom, ended up coming to plenty of formats beyond the PC. It was incredible on PS1, surprisingly competent, all things considered, on SNES, and a fart fest on 32X, among others. But none of these ports, none of any of the 90s ports, were actually as good as the original. They could be good impressions or competent facsimiles with rough edges, but no machine outside of a beefed up 486 had the real power needed to do the job properly. Nothing had the oomph. So Doom, pure, proper Doom, and not these watered down imitations of the original, still remained out of reach for most players. So where Doom was ubiquitous and simultaneously impossible to possess for so many people, Doom clones acted as padding, a placebo, a snifter of methadone compared to its pure brown. The clones plugged the gaps until an official port of Doom launched on the platform, and even after an official port came out, the clones could still do some heavy lifting of their own, sometimes to show that more could have been done on the technical side with what it brought to the platform in question, sometimes to just be another good game to play. Just because Doom was the top dog, it didn't necessarily mean the efforts put into bringing it to other platforms would always have the best results. Basically, where Doom might stumble on a specific device, the clones might stroll. There were many reasons for this, but what it boiled down to was a pretty obvious factor. Porting a game from one format to a completely different one is always going to be more challenging than just making a game for an individual format from the beginning. Taking the inspiration from Doom, and the popularity of course, and spinning it into your own unique title that fit the platform in question well, that's just a thing that made sense to do, even if the end results weren't really very Doomy in practice. It was a smart approach, and one that smacked of, dare I say it, integrity in the creative choices being made. Not all Doom clones were cynical cash grabs. But, well, Doom clones were often cash grabs too, riding on those coattails as they were. Some were egregious nonsense, some were nonsense. Some could be half-decent, clone is not a slur, but there were a hell of a lot of Doom clones united by the fact they existed purely because someone thought they could make money off of them. This approach resulted in games that looked to id's original more than they looked to the format at hand. So while it wasn't a case of failing to port the existing Doom properly, it was a case of often failing to port the ideas and style of Doom to whatever machine the game was coming to. There was no greater example of this than the Amiga. By the mid-90s, Doom was such an essential part of any platform's claim to being a real gaming machine that even if it couldn't have a true version of its game, it had to have something that could at least act as a proxy. The Amiga was a home computer initially made by Commodore and then, well, that's a whole other video. It was a fantastic few different machines with a wonderful selection of games, but the simple fact was the Amiga couldn't play Doom. It couldn't handle Doom. Doom would not work on the Amiga. And given by this early to mid-90s period the Amiga was still seen as a capable gaming device, sometimes more so than the PC depending on who you asked, it was an almost unbelievable situation to be in that the beloved computer, even the all-powerful Amiga 1200, could not handle Doom. Unbelievable in the minds of those Amiga owners, mainly in Europe at least. Being stood up like this by id, being overlooked in favour of a machine made to confuse you with DOS prompts and play bad platformers America still wank on about to this day, well, it wound up the Amiga community. There were campaigns, cries, rumours, and more about getting proper Doom on the Amiga. Someone emailed Doom co-creator John Carmack in 1994 pleading with him to give Amiga owners some of the good stuff and publish the response they got online, meaning I can really try hard to rein in my impression of Carmack because it's just a bit mean. Anyway, he wrote in 1994, "The Amiga is not powerful enough to run Doom. It takes the full speed of a 68040 to play the game properly even if you have a chunky pixel mode in hardware. Having to convert to bit planes would kill it even on the fastest Amiga hardware, not to mention the effect it would have on the majority of the Amiga base." Sorry, John. So not only did the Amiga not get Doom, but it got a slap in the face from one of the guys who made Doom. The whole community was told it wasn't possible. It was not a thing their beloved machine could handle. And it was no surprise what happened next. The Amiga died. Well, that's jumping ahead a couple of steps. It did die eventually, much as there are dozens of us trying to keep the dream alive to this day. But what happened before that demise was a bunch of games came to Amiga trying their hardest to clone the true Doom experience. And they were very much in the vein I mentioned before, of games trying to imitate a style and aesthetic more than they were trying to fit in with the platform they were being made for. With that, the Amiga became fertile ground for Doom clones, and plenty made themselves known over the machine's remaining few years of life. They weren't Doom, though, and the Amiga died without its own proper port of its masterpiece, John Carmack's cackling email ringing through the ears of every owner of the ill-fated, once wonderful home computer. Well, something like that at least. Yes, for God's sake, I know there's a Doom on accelerated Amigas now, and that guy is making Dread the very doomy Doom clone that runs properly on a basic Amiga 500. The Amiga didn't have a proper port of Doom though, and Carmack was proven right in the computer's lifetime. The Amiga died, but the clones continued for a while on all the other formats. But by the time you got to 1996, things shifted significantly, and just a year or two later, you'd be lucky to hear anyone with a nose to the dirt of the gaming world refer to a new FPS as a clone of anything. It had become established, the roots had taken root, and a genre had flourished. It just got to the point where you couldn't realistically call something a clone of what was by that point a bit old-fashioned. Duke Nukem 3D and Quake in 1996, GoldenEye in 1997, Half-Life in 1998. Quake was a Doom clone like the Model T was a horse and cart clone. Half-Life was to Doom what IMAX was to cave paintings. Doom had been outdone, so to clone it wouldn't be the most financially prudent move, and to refer to something as a Doom clone in the games press would make you sound out of touch, like I am right now. And that's basically it. The world moved on because it was profitable to do so. Capitalism! Thanks to my patrons on Patreon who keep me going through the power of pure capitalism and hardly any cloning activities. I'm off to play the Amiga version of Doom while doing some full body sobbing over its unofficial status. Bye!